January 12th is our digital contest theme, which is digital contest with the theme of open. On January 19th, we have Harry Crossland coming, who is a cosplay photographer, and he's going to be doing some demonstrations and some live things also. On January 26th, we have our color and monochrome print contest, which also has the theme of open. And then on February 2nd, we have our own John Milliker Jr. doing a presentation on aerial photography. For tonight, we are going to be having a photo critique. So everyone who participated in our contest this past fall could enter in photographs that didn't win. And we're going to critique the photos within our members. If you're online, please feel free to type in your comments and I will share them with everyone. Okay, let's get started. Looks like we have our first photograph up. Anyone have some feedback they want to give?
The lights.
Yes.
We've taken the lights down on that. Let me go ahead and see if I can't read this here. This one is called Abstract Cabbage, and it is one of our unlimited photographs that have been entered.
Yeah, my opinion is it's a nice photo. I just think the background and the way the picture is taken is just too light in between them. But that's just my opinion. I think if you turned it up a little bit or had a different background, maybe a black background, it might work and you could fix that in Photoshop. But it just seems that the background and the flowers blending together too much.
Yeah, the edges do blend off into it and you kind of lose them. Anyone else have some input?
Is it supposed to be abstract?
But also at the same time, that center is a bit dark as far, it just transitions a little too rapidly from dark to light to me. But I really like the idea of turning this into black and white, and I guess I didn't know it was a cabbage. I thought it was a flower, but that shows my own lack of knowledge.
Is anyone online saying anything?
You need to go on and check that. I can't, with Lightroom, I can't pull that. I can't pull it off the screen.
Looks like no one has said anything yet.
Okay.
Are we ready to move on to the next photograph?
Now I heard a comment from the audience. Somebody asked if that's considered an abstract.
Yeah, was it in an abstract category?
I'm not sure. I don't think we had any abstracts this fall, so it could have been open or it could have been.
It was just the title, but.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Is this an abstract? Now, you know, we had Rich in the audience talk about that, and he really wasn't sure. He didn't really notice that it was a cabbage. He thought it might have been a flower, and absolutely, it could also be a flower as well. But is this abstract enough? Not that it matters. A title is just a title sometimes.
I'm not sure unless you zoom in, or it's still the whole thing, and you still know it's a plant of some sort.
I love the tonality on it, but I think everybody really hit the nail on the head that the outside petals really kind of go to white too quick, and then you kind of lose a little bit to the background is my feeling.
I think it's too contrasty in the center and then fades too much on the edges.
Mm-hmm. Great idea if it will work out. I like it. Conceptually, I like it.
Can you repeat? If somebody doesn't have a microphone, can
sorry.
you repeat, Christine?
Rich says that conceptually he really likes the image and that with a little bit of work he thinks it would really work.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the next one. Heading to work, and this is a unlimited image.
This is interesting. It tells a little bit of a story, but I'm not sure. I like all the wires that are on the edge. I'm not sure if that adds to the story or not. Maybe zooming in onto the bottom corner. That seems to be where most of the story is, in my opinion. Anyone else have some input? One moment. Here you go, Ron.
You have a lot going on in this image, and certainly the most unique part of this is the elephant and the man on the top of the elephant. It's a pretty small part of the image because it's also competing with the wires on the side. So when you go to select a subject for an image, try to have no other elements in there that would compete with it, and you would know exactly what it is. But I'm not sure it all holds together as the elephants and the wires. Now that said, the colors looks to be really good, and the sky's good, and so on. And I think they made a good effort to try to contain everything and within the frame.
I'll take the microphone around, Christine. I'll let you go ahead and work Lightroom. Have a comment from Rich. Here you go, Rich.
Actually, following along that, I would take the sky out entirely. I'd crop the top third or so off. And that on the upper left, there's something coming in there that's obviously close into the sky. It's not necessary. And I like the poles and the wires and the elephant. I like the sort of contrast of the transport method and then the telegraph type thing. But I think if you took the top third or so of it off, the sky doesn't do anything for anything. It's about the elephant, well, as it says, going to work. In a way, it's street photography, except the street is a dirt path.
Yeah.
And I know some judges would say there's no street there, but there is a street. Anyway, I just think the top third doesn't add to it.
We have a comment on Facebook from Doug Wood who says, I don't know if Jackie is on, to quote her mother, but the tail end of an animal is never interesting unless it's some sort of joke. Anyone else have some input?
And I think the judge said that when this was shown, and I'm not sure that I agree with that. He's going away from you. I don't know. Wouldn't look as good with him coming.
The image looks a lot brighter compared to the first time I saw this. It might be the screen is higher resolution, but it has much more impact compared to the first time it was presented to the club.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like what Rich said about the telephone poles. I think the telephone poles really make it. And it kind of has that juxtaposition between, kind of old transport and new technology. And the fact that there's this village or town or city that still is using elephant transport. It's pretty interesting.
On Facebook, Scott Dine says, the sky gives it depth, gives an idea of the immensity of the forest. And John Verdi says, the contrast between elephant and modern wires is striking.
Yeah.
I think the concept here is really interesting. I'm just not sure it totally comes through.
Well, I did see that contrast between the telephone wires and the ancient mode of transportation, and that's the feel I was trying to get. I agree, maybe, less sky is not necessary in here, but I think the telephone poles were for that concept.
Yeah, I agree.
What you could do with the sky is put some clouds in there. Stop them.
Yeah, well,
You could put a moon in there too.
Doug says, I suspect D. Hayes would pop it out a bit.
Was it?
oh, I wouldn't want to be, he said that's part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
The dust in there?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
part of it.
No, you wouldn't mess with the dust, all the food is called contrast.
Agreed.
Contrast would be great.
It's part of the story.
Oh.
Anyone else have any more comments? Okay, let's move on to the next one. This is called Inside Goldeski. Goldeski?
No.
Um,
You got the wrong title. That's my
Oh.
picture.
okay.
There's something about the dark.
Oh, light and dark.
Light
Sorry.
and dark. It's a light and a dark, and this is the one I subtitled when I sent it to you, Judges Don't Like Skies. It's a picture of the sky. I like the sky. I thought it was really cool. I took a picture of it. It may or may not be competition worthy, but I like skies. So I'm curious what people think about it. I was particularly emphasizing the dark clouds and then the very bright lit up one. And I don't know whether the tree adds anything to it or subtracts from it.
It gives it perspective. We know where you were standing and where you were aiming.
I like the contrast of the dark and white. I'm not sure if the blue adds anything. I like silhouettes, so I like the tree.
I like all the intricate shapes. If you kind of squint your eyes, it's really complex.
And I guess you do have the contrast.
No?
You do have the contrast of the yellow of the bright cloud and the blue of the sky, which I guess does add a little bit to the story.
Any other comments here?
I've never seen clouds so contrasted. The dark is so dark, and then the gold in the middle cloud is probably suggesting sunset or dawn. But how you get those dark clouds, quite
I
strange.
don't remember, I probably exaggerated it a bit.
But all those cloud shapes were original to the shot.
Yeah.
Some of the comments was, and this is Rich's photo, and he says he may have exaggerated a little bit, but everything else, the original is the same. The clouds actually look that way. Very nice, Rich.
Any more comments? No one online said anything, so let's move on. This is Toledo Alcazar.
That is also mine.
Oh, let me give you the microphone in there, Rich.
Okay.
Coming over.
This is the Alcazar in Toledo, Spain. And it was entered into the doors and windows, and the judge didn't think those were doors. I interpreted the doors theme a little differently than the judge did, a little more generously. So I appreciate comments on the picture. I love the colors in the picture and just the architecture of the whole thing.
Okay. I like the different colors. The yellow and blues here still stand out. You have the kind of darker foreground, which I could see why some people might not like it, but I kind of like the contrast of the shadows with the brightness in the center. Although the very most bright part of this photo is the floor in front of that statue, which might distract some people. Anyone else?
Another thought about this, a lot of the images that the last few competitions, the last couple themed competitions, images were thrown out because they didn't adhere to the theme in the same way as some of the others did. So it depends in part, that's judge dependent, and the judge decides that doors have to be more like a door rather than an arched doorway or whatever. That's the judge's call on it. So, you know, I get that, but I really like the color of the roof right just past the arches there. Christine's right, you got some hot area there where the sun is bright in the background that could be dropped down a little bit. Rich, I'd almost play with that foreground a little bit and see if it becomes better or more to your liking if you either lighten up the foreground or darken the foreground. It may be that having these foregrounds is, if you're going to go silhouettes, maybe go all dark and see if that helps. But it may be that there's enough information in those shadows that you can bring these up and it all becomes the context looking from the side going in. But there's a lot to like about the picture though.
Yeah, nice picture. The only thing I would do with that is I believe that that thing is a camera up there, and I'd get rid of that thing,
Yeah.
okay? Because it's not part of the, you know, it's,
What, at the top?
yeah, it looks like a camera to me, okay?
Yeah.
And I
You're
would take
right.
that out. That's the only thing I see.
Pay attention to that. I agree with Ron. I agree with Ron that play with the foreground, but I'm almost certain I'd have to go darker as opposed to lighter. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. I was looking where he was, and I didn't see him. I hadn't even noticed that camera-like thing. The foreground, I suspect I played with this enough that I'd have to go darker on those. And I now am blinded by, it's not just the white on the floor in front of the statue, but going up a couple of the columns looked blown out to me, which I had never noticed before. Interesting, thank you. Yeah, I put this in something other than doors and windows.
I'm glad Fred said something about that camera because I had two things to say. And one was the camera. The second thing is I think this would actually really benefit from a triptych kind of presentation as far as framing on a wall. I think if you were able to find a way to separate and to crop those images into 3 portraits and put them on a wall, I think it would really make this impact so much better.
It's interesting, when we had the triptych competition, I tried that and got thrown out because they were just 3 parts of the same picture.
What Rich
So I
just said.
That could be in a judge's, I like the idea.
Right. What Rich was saying that he likes the idea, but what he had done something similar to our triptych competition several years ago. When he had 3 images of the same subject, the judge threw them out. But yeah, it's definitely subjective to each judge.
Online, Scott says, nice to hear that someone is reacting to what interests the photographer. I think this was with the previous image, but I think it still goes with this. Doug says, our description was pretty clear that a door is the closure, not the opening. I guess the definition that was handed out is the way he interpreted it.
Proves I probably didn't read it carefully.
And Scott then also said some nitpicking here. I suggest that you watch the people, and I'm not sure the comment was finished, but and see what sort. I'm not sure what he means by that, but.
Rich, were you there with a tripod?
No.
Gotcha. Because sometimes you could, if you could set a tripod up and you can just take a photo, wait a minute or two, take another photo, you can layer them and then try to erase some of those people.
I decided that I'd leave them in.
Yeah, I like it. I like it because it shows the
Probably
people.
more most of the time. I remember standing there a long time.
Gotcha.
Well, Rich, because of the extreme dark in the foreground, extreme light in the background, that's a very tough combination of lighting to get all in one picture and get it right with one snap.
I had to work very hard on this picture to keep it from being awful.
I'm sure.
Any other comments?
Okay, let's move on to the next one. This is Liz.
Oh, let me give this to Fred. Fred.
Yeah, well, it looks different on that screen than it does on my screen, okay? Basically, it's an old picture, but it looks like her hair's too dark. And it looks like, because it was a print, it didn't come out like that. And, you know, the whole objective here was to get a light on the side and the front and back and, you know, just give it some type of dimension. But on that screen, it looks too dark to me, the hair.
What part do you think is too dark?
Right here, on the
On the face?
Yeah, in the shadow and her hair, because I had more detail in her hair and more on her side of the face.
Yeah, the question was what he thought was more dark. Did you have a hair light? I don't see a hair light.
No, it was 2 lights. It was one on the back. It was a white backdrop, and it was a octa on camera left, and it was what do you call it? Strip box on camera right in the back to put that light on her shoulder right there, and on her hair. It's been a while since I did that one, looks completely different on that. And, the only comment I got on it had a pretty smile, and that was it. And my son said, maybe I saw it through the Jones guy.
Any comments?
I like this. I don't like that her back eye is kind of cut off by her hair, that you can't see the edge of it. But that's just something that I like to see on photographs.
That's just in shadow. It's not cut off by her hair.
Oh, okay.
Also, the shadow on her nose sort of runs right into the eyebrow. I don't know whether you could do something to deliberately make the gap there or whether that suited you, but it almost looks like 3/4 of a ring around her eye.
Online, Doug says the back eye is also a little dark. Anyone else have something to say? Any input? Okay, let's move on to the next one then. This is Mike's, which is Dreaming of Travel. I always liked this photo of his.
Did Mike have this in a sepia as well, or was it always in black and white?
I don't remember.
Yeah, hopefully Mike's online listening. But yeah, I think this is well done. I think the judges I think one of the judges' comments was they didn't like that there's a camera and a globe and a telescope, and he kind of didn't get the idea of these are all things that kind of relate to travel. But I think it's very well done. Any comments here?
I really liked the story he told here, and I think it's well lit because it's enough shadows but enough light to see everything.
Ask Scott Dine online if he remembers the name of that camera. I'm sure he does. I'm sure Scott used one of those cameras.
What was the theme for this? Was this a theme or an open?
I'm not really sure. Ron asked if this was one of our theme images or one of the open images.
This might have been in open in like November, maybe. I could be wrong.
Because all of us took liberties with the still life theme. And that's why I wondered, because in many respects, you've got some individual objects there that come together. And that was part of the issue in still life, is having all of the elements of it kind of relate together and move to a place.
And the still life couldn't involve a human form, though, could it?
Well, normally it wouldn't, no, but I think a lot of us just tried to be creative with the still life because it's sort of a static type of image.
Well-explored genre.
And technically and compositionally, I mean, the picture all fits together, everything perfectly, everything's in focus, great background. You got just enough light on that telescope back there to have that fit in. If I were to do anything, if this were my image, maybe the only thing I would do would be to take the camera out and then not have it not be a still life, because it's actually a good image otherwise.
Anyone else have some input?
I wonder if anybody has a comment. His face is the brightest thing in the picture. And I wonder if toning that down a little and putting a little more brightness, you're trying to look at these objects that are surrounding him. If there were a little more light showing those things that are supposed to be relevant to a theme of travel, I assume that's an unspoken theme in there. I just wonder if a little change in the tonality in different places would be better. I don't know. It's awfully good.
I'm not sure if I see his face as being too bright. It definitely brings you back into the image, and as your eyes move out, you go down up to the camera, over the telescope, and back in. I think it's really nicely done.
I didn't claim it was too bright. I just said it was the brightest thing I saw, and I wonder if...
Gotcha. Other comments?
Okay. This is headshot. Interesting.
I believe this was the Windows theme.
This was Windows theme, Ron was saying.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this fits Windows. It is a window, but the story isn't the window.
I think it's really clever, but I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it's a window.
But
I
I
think it's
wonder
real
if the
clever.
story's the reflection.
And also the opening where the head would be.
Yeah.
I like it. It's clever, very clever.
It's one of those pictures that is very clever, that I really like it in many ways, and I would expect it not to win a competition. I wouldn't be, if I took a picture like that, if I were smart enough to take one, I wouldn't expect it to win, but it'd be one that, I really like. And I think there's a lot to be said for pictures that you don't expect to win a competition, but are clever.
Online, John, whose picture this is, says this was considered off topic, but he feels that without the window, there would be no story. Agree.
Kind of like the idea of maybe he cropped it down to a square and got the framing elements out of there. That would be a great square crop.
John, I wonder if if you would, I won't say dehaze, but get a little more contrast into it so the image itself on the glass kind of pops out just a bit more. That might, because you look at it and you have to take a second to figure out what you're looking at, then it hits you. You're looking at the whole body.
If you were to adjust contrast a little bit, you could bring the subject down and maybe the background up.
I agree, maybe the frame on the image is not necessary at all to make this work.
Yeah,
You already know it's a window.
right.
Online, Diane Vatcher says, I think it is a nice contrast to the background, which is true. And then Scott Dine says, very good idea. Humor is the most difficult to photograph. Pictures like this mean you have gone from looking to seeing.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else have something to say? This is morning. Very good landscape shot.
This is one of those, to me, this is one of those situations where you got to pick one. Are you picking the sky to tell me a story, or are you picking the foreground to tell me a story? You've got the horizon right in the middle, and honestly, everything foreground is so dark. I want you to take out that little island. I want you to put that horizon on the third, and I want to see more of that sky. I don't even care if it's just a normal, boring blue sky. I think if you pulled that down a third, you gave me more sky to look at, and you took out that little island in the middle. You still have the reflections of the trees. I love the way it's very silhouette-y, but I think your story is more the sky. As bland as it may be up there, I don't know.
Doug, whose picture this is, said the judge wanted it to be warmer.
It's a little cool, but that's exactly what the color is when you're in the shadows. When the sun isn't warming you up, the sky's blue, so you've got a blue color cast in all your shadows. I like it. Here you go, Rich.
Question for Doug, if this is his picture, was there a possibility of making that log a leading line in, moving over, so you get rid of the island by being in a different place?
Diane Vatcher says, cool forward, warm receding. Yeah, I like it, but again, that island in the middle, I think maybe a panorama without that. But those rocks and grass right in the middle and the front really add nothing to the photograph. I like the log, but the rest of it, I'm not sure adds anything.
Just to be contrary, I like it exactly the way it is. However, the trees, there's a lot of lost detail. That's the only thing I would try and bring out, but the composition is fine the way it is, at least my opinion.
Doug says it is a panorama with lots of shots, so it could be recropped. Scott says, wonderful photograph, very different. I wouldn't change a thing. Diane Vatcher says you could just brighten around the trees in the foreground. I'm not sure I'd like that. I like the silhouettiness of the front. Anything else? Okay. This is Inside Godelsky. I'm sorry, I read the wrong title earlier.
Where is this?
Inside Godelsky.
This is the University of Maryland in the Godelsky building. And it's one of my flip images. But to make it a bit more interesting, there are subtle differences between left and right.
Yeah, I see. So what did you do? You flipped it and then
I
added and subtracted?
Right. On the right side, I took out a lower window. And on the left side, I took out a couple of lights. Partly it's an exercise in just how convincingly I can make these edits to look natural.
I like the curves and the repetitiveness. Anyone else have something?
You go, Fred.
Is there any way that you could straighten it up more? To me, it looks out of perspective. It's like it's leaning backwards, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it is leaning backwards because I was low down and shooting up. It's taken with a cell phone.
But it's still a Photoshop. I think we have,
Yeah, you could do a perspective correction for it. I think you might lose some of the...
The comment from Fred was that definitely looks like the building's falling backwards, and that's when you don't have your sensor parallel to the face of the building, and then a little bit of conversational and perspective correction ensued about in your photo editor program of choice. Any other comments?
Diane Vatcher says the blue up top is awesome.
Yeah. And that's really well done, Bob. You continue to mess with our brains. Because as soon as you see an image like this, you start looking at the similarities, and then boom, Bob edits something out that just kind of just ruins your reality.
Bob, you've done a lot of these flip images and you're a master of it because I haven't seen anybody else do them as well as you have. You got great color here. It's nice and crisp all the way throughout. I might agree that straightening up those lines on the outside might help it. Could even go the other way. Could warp it so that it's even more exaggerated since you don't really care whether it's a reality or not anyway. But a question. The only thing that it's not a criticism, but I see the large white area down at the bottom, which of course below the curves. There's nothing there, and everything else seems to have a place and going someplace. I don't know in your magic whether there's something there that might help it anchor a little bit. But you got to keep moving on these flipped images because one of these days you're going to hit the right judge and it's really going to take off. And this is one. It's a miss for the judge in many respects.
I did remove one of the doors at the bottom.
No, was it in the doors and window contact?
Yeah, the doors and windows, yeah.
The question was if this was entered in the doors and windows contest, and Bob said yes.
Scott says well done. Anyone else? Okay.
Of course, I was taken as a dam, a very bad day. What do you call it? The judge said something about, I missed it by one frame, and actually saying, I missed it completely. And so I had to do some work on it to make it right. And so I think she said something about there was branches in the way, and the way the day was, it was a terrible day, so I just made it black and white, threw some clouds in there and did this, did that, and that's what I came up with. That's what I did.
Any comments? In person or online? Ron?
Yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot of black and white eagles, so I like that aspect of it. I'm wondering, if, to focus on the eagles, I really get distracted by that branch up there, and that's a big old branch to try to clone out. But it seems to me if I didn't have to look at that, I might focus back on the two eagles a little more so, and even these small branches down near the bottom here and there, that a few of those could be cloned out, and maybe I think you did the right thing by letting the sky in the background be fairly faded out, if you know what I mean. You didn't accentuate that, so.
Yeah, it was a terrible day, it was gray.
Yeah,
Okay, and it was,
not a good day for color.
But Ron does bring up a really good point. It's very difficult, and you better have a good image if you're going to turn a flower or a butterfly or an animal into black and white. Definitely well done. Great tones.
Anyone else? Okay. This is Aliens Finally.
That's nice.
I love the abstractness of this.
This is stunning. I don't know what to say about it. You've got the three in the middle. You've got the anchor on the bottom. You've got the lines, the triangles. Perfect.
I have no idea what it is, but it's just totally intriguing. The shapes, the conic sections, the crossing of that, and then the banding that's different on each one. I mean, that's a spectacular picture. I don't know. It would place in my tops number if I.
Absolutely. It's a heck of an abstract. I'm going to walk up to the TV and see if I can get a better look. I don't even know what it is unless these things are rotating lights, which could be the area, the lines going sideways.
Did somebody admit to that picture?
It's John Verdi, and his input says, the judge said it was too busy and thought it was an overlap of several pictures. It's not. It's a long exposure cropped a bit.
Well, John, I think I'm going to give this to Bob, but I think Bob would also agree. Sometimes when you go crazy and you come up with an amazing image like this, sometimes the judges don't get it. I know that we do that with darkroom stuff and tintype, and I know, Bob doing a lot of experimental, above the curve stuff. Some judges just don't get it. Here you go, Bob.
The amazing thing is that this is actually, as John says, a single image. It's actually those cradle of balls on a string. There are 5 of them, and what he did is he just set the thing in motion for a long exposure. So what you're seeing is the threads going back and forth.
Yeah, John said it's called a Newton's pendulum.
Newton's pendulum, yeah, it's an amazing image and a great idea.
Ask them what the background was.
John, if you're listening, they'd like to know what the background is. But Diane Vatcher says, love this image. It would place with the right judge. John?
Just a couple of thoughts. I think that Diane's comments really right, it needs to hit, it needs to have the right buyer or the right judge, one or the other, because this is one that would be bought on somebody's walls. But what I think is kind of genius with this is that line, the dark area at the bottom, that nice clean line across there. You got all these geometrics, all these lines going in different directions. And on top of all that, rather than just being in traditional black and white, he's decided to use a little bit of a sepia tonality to it. And that makes it even more mysterious to me. But yeah, somebody's going to buy that sometime.
Online, Scott says, it's compelling. Too many of the judges don't know how to deal with new viewpoints. John says, it has been shown in 2 shows and purchased, so I'm not disappointed with it. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on. This is DC Metro.
That's mine again. This was.
Hold on a sec, Rich.
Hang on one second.
This was a print, and this is my attempt at folding a picture a la Bob. It is the DC Metro, and I took a right half and a left half, and of course the stuff in the middle, which was the platform, I just eliminated from both sides. And the whole idea was to get something that was circular. I spent a long time learning a few ins and outs of Photoshop that I didn't understand to get the circles right. And it pretty much just got dismissed, so I didn't get any feedback on it. And that's one of the reasons I put it in here. My intention is to put it in again, just to see what happens, but.
Are there any people on the platform? You had to take out?
The platform is gone. Actually, there was, because there's a center thing with benches and everything.
Right.
And I just cut it, I cut it right at the edge before I folded it. So if there were any people, and I don't remember, they'd been gone anyway. I don't remember there being any people there, and I actually reversed if you look carefully, the wording on, it's Capital South, I think, and the wording on the 2 sides have been reversed just to, so you can read them both.
I think it's a wonderful image, and I love symmetry. And ironically, I didn't realize it was a flip. But the detail you say of reversing the letters so it's correct both ways is nice.
I think it might, what I might try is right in the center, if you could put something in there that's bright, like a train coming at you or something. If you could make that white a little brighter in the middle and bigger, that something's coming at you. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Online, Mike says, nice abstract. Diane says, I think it's a great image, and she thinks toned, maybe.
Rich, I don't have any suggestions on what you might do with this other than bring it back in again. It's a image waiting for the right judge.
I think it's good. I like the lines. I like the circle. I mean, it's a great image.
Back when Flickr was a big thing, I was a big part. I loved being in this group called Squircles, and it was a circle that was cropped inside of a square. And I love circles inside of squares, and this really is amazing. The only thing I wonder is if that white border is hurting you.
It was a print.
It was a print.
It was a print, so I left the white border on when I printed it, and then of course the frame went over it, which made a white border.
Gotcha. What Rich was saying.
I just left it for this to remind you that it was a print, and that's what it looked like.
Gotcha. What Rich is saying is that this originally was a print, and he used a white mat, and therefore he kind of kept it that way to remind us that's how he had originally presented it.
Would this be an exception for a black mat? I know most people don't think black mats are.
If you had
the right thing.
If you had the black and a black mat, at least my opinion, it would definitely draw your eye to the center. Right now, I wonder if it's drawing us to the outside. And my recommendation was either remove it or maybe keep that white border, but just tone down the white a little down a bit. That way it's not kind of pulling us out.
There is no white border that shows on the picture.
Gotcha.
In the print. But I hear this comment about there's nothing, you're drawn to the center, there's nothing there.
Well, I mean, you do have what Rich was saying, and I'll give him the mic.
I get the point that everything is pointing to the center, there's really nothing there. But I don't know what to put there. I'd have to look through a lot of pictures to find one that has something. You know, I don't know how I would do it, but it would be neat if I could put something there.
Online, Mike says, I like this. It looks almost like a fan.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I don't know what Rich could put in there without it looking kind of cheesy or cartoony.
Daffy Duck.
Daffy Duck? Fred saying a person?
When I first saw this on this little screen here, it looks almost like a nose cone on an airplane, you know, like you have the reflective ends of the airplane, you know, that kind of nose opens up. That's what I saw first.
Shuttlecock.
Rich said a shuttlecock.
I could take the top and flip it down to the bottom. There you go. I could double bob it.
Anyone else? Doug Wood says just a white rectangle for an exit door. And Diane Vatcher suggested an elephant. Okay.
You know what you could go back one. How about you take and copy that, and you just copy and copy and copy, so it looks like it's going infinity down into nothingness. Instead of having a dark circle there, it just goes to a pinpoint of nothing.
I've tried that before with arches, and it really kind of is intriguing when I had one that I was going to enter. I was going through my pictures and I realized that my wife took the picture. So it was kind of hard for me to submit it.
Rich
the
said-
original picture. It takes about 4 and you can't tell.
Rich said he had tried that with arches before. That's great.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the ideas.
This is Bowsprit.
Bowsprit?
Bowsprit.
Yeah, that one's mine. I don't remember I don't remember why it was rejected. Again, it was a cloudy day, and I think the contrast of the clouds and the water is what appealed to me.
One of the things that I think detracts on this image is your horizons right in the center. So you have half sky, half water, which could be what you wanted in it. But I think, and as beautiful as that sky is, if you brought it down a little bit, I think it would make a little more impact.
The dark part of the hull of the boat has no detail in it and is large. So it gathers my attention, but I can't tell what it is. So I don't know. I mean, I love the sky, I love the water, the ropes are really cool. There's just that big black thing in the middle, which is the boat, of course, and I don't know, maybe it's just the way this display is. I bet in the original picture you could see a little bit of structure in there. I don't know whether you could lighten it up or, anyway, that's just what I see there. I like it though.
Other comments? Any comments online, Christine?
Doug says it's a big arrow pointing off the image.
Yeah, and pointing to docks, a little bit busy over there.
There's nothing that your eye's being drawn into. It's kind of being shot off.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Down by 2. I like this.
Wow, this is impactful. This is definitely impactful.
This is Ron's.
This was my image. I was shooting a baseball game, a youth baseball game back, I think it was in the summer. And the pitcher didn't do as well as he had wanted, and he was feeling really bad because it put him further down by two runs by that time. But I looked over and I could see his anguish, and I tried to capture that, and I realized his face, his eyes are very dark, and he had some paint, some of the black on his face, make him look, all the baseball players do that to look really mean. And he had that, so I couldn't see behind the hat as well. But to me, it always seems like look for the fingers, or look for the hands or the eyes. And so I saw his fingers, and that's what I went to directly. And it's one of those. It's one of my favorite images, but I think it's going to be judge dependent. And that particular day, I think it was an open image. It just didn't appeal, and that happens.
The body language tells it all, though. You don't even really need to see the eyes in this.
I think it's a great image, okay? And forget about what everybody thinks about, the judge thinks about it. It's just a good image. I mean, like, if it was a Major League Baseball, it would be inside a magazine.
Online, Diane Thatcher says, very impactful. Scott Dine says, subtle emotion. Title is simple and to the point. Diane says, good tone. It folds into the frame rather well. Emotion and context.
I have to agree with all that. It's a great picture, but I would have a tendency, if I were judging, which I wouldn't be, I'd rather see someone happy than someone who's, it makes me sad to see that person there, and I can see that might influence a view of it. It's like, oh man, I don't want to see that poor guy, but it really does capture that. How I think we've all felt when we've competed in something and really, not pictures, and really not had things go well.
Well, you can't have happiness without sadness. Only thing I think about is, have you ever thought about burning out all the? You've got some like another player on the left. If you were to burn that out, there's also something behind his neck, a little light spot. Not that the photo needs it, but if you were to take and burn all of that out, it may help that feeling of he's feeling alone and he's feeling by himself and very solitude. Just a thought.
Okay, anyone else? All aboard. I like the story this tells, but it looks like it's a bit close, cropped in on the left.
Any comments here?
Help me out, Christine. What do you think the story is? That's something I have trouble with.
Rich just
Figuring
asked
out
Christine.
stories in my own pictures or anybody else's, so I'm just curious.
Rich just asked Christine what he thinks she thinks the story is here.
I'm thinking that the train is coming into the station or getting ready to leave, but in my mind's eye, it's coming into the station. But I mean, if there were people waiting or people on the platform, it might tell a better story. You can't quite tell, which is why I think it needs a little more space to figure out more of the setting.
Anybody else have an idea? What does it make you feel? What kind of story is this telling? Any other thoughts?
Online, Diane says the train needs a little more space. I think the top is good and the 3 lamps.
Problem is you've got so many photographers that make so many great images of trains. So that's number one. It's like anything being around boats or being around water or being around birds. So there's so much out there. You've better have a good, impactful image. But I also think the story of this depends on how you're feeling. I'm ready to get out there and travel, so this makes me feel like, man, my train's here. I've got my bags with me. Some other people who may be missing somebody may kind of pull a story out of that train, like, oh, my loved ones are coming back, and I'm getting ready to meet somebody. What do you think, Rich?
I like that comment because I've always felt like pictures don't tell stories. A good picture allows you to imagine a story built around it, and different people here are imagining different stories. But the picture itself is just a picture. It's not telling the story. It doesn't speak. And I always feel that, that's where mystery sometimes comes in and helps. And, well, I just struggle with that constantly. And, and I think John is right that so many people take so many good pictures of trains that this kind of gets lost in the shuffle as, gee, it's another picture of a train. And I've done plenty of that myself. And I think that's probably what happens when I take pictures of skies, and judges don't react to them because they've seen a lot of skies in their life, and they're very seldom unique.
Online, Scott says, well said, Rich, well said.
I feel good.
Now, a question I have, and I'm going to direct this to Ron. I'm going to put Ron on the spot. You've got images, and I know some clubs, they don't allow you to do titles. We do titles. And if this were my image and I said "ready for a trip" in my title, it's gonna tell that story for you. It's gonna give you that story already. So maybe Ron has some thoughts on does a title really matter as far as judging is concerned?
I've heard more of our judges, first of all, say that they like having the title. And I've heard more of them this year also than even in the past refer to the title whenever they judge it. And sometimes it really helps a judge get there and like it, and sometimes they see some conflict on it.
Do you think a title could be a crutch for a photo, Ron? Could that detract? If I'm looking at this and thinking happy thoughts, and the title is the last ride of 92134, could it detract if the image has a really good story on its own to tell?
Well, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought of it that way. Yeah, it could take confuse the judge and take them in a different direction. Now, when I looked at it, the couple issues that I was just wondering, because I like to play with images my own several different ways before I finally settle on it. It sort of feels a little black and white, like one of Mike Thomas's black and white old train images, down in the front, because it's a black engine, even the red bumper up front notwithstanding. But then I saw all this foliage in the background, but I really don't want to get distracted by that. I want to look at the train. Then I start thinking, I almost want to look dead on at the train and study the front of it, or I want to get off to the left a little bit more so I can see a bit of the side. But I really, really like those three lamps over there. And I'm wondering if, with all those together, what would happen if you had somebody standing there with a briefcase, waiting for the train, just one person? I mean, there are a lot of elements that are good background. I don't know if you really need all of that space above the train, above the steam. Maybe it needs to be dropped down a little bit. I tend to do tighter crops rather than wider crops than some people, and sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't. But I didn't exactly answer your question, John, but because I'm not sure how to answer it.
Online, this is Doug Wood's photo. He says, there are tracks to the left that aren't very interesting, but he could give it more space. And whenever he submitted this, it was the 2 competitions ago when we lost the sound, and so he never got to hear what the judges' comments were. And Diane Vatcher says, titles help with intent, humor, and/or who is in the image.
Yeah, I just have two comments on it too. I think it's cropped in a little bit too much, and it just appears static. I think a person in there would have enhanced it, but getting back to the titles, I think as photographers, it helps develop our creativity.
I have noticed that on occasion, you read the titles initially. Sometimes the judges seem to have forgotten the titles when it comes around the second time. It varies.
But sometimes it really sticks.
And some of them really stick, that's right. And maybe that's part of the judging is if the title really sticks, it means something.
We'll just have to have Bob read the titles louder in the future.
Good thoughts on the titles. Here you go, Bob.
Okay, anyone else?
Doug might want to comment. I'm guessing this was taken in England. It kind of looks like an English train.
I'll see if he responds.
You almost see Harry Potter.
Looks like just an engine to me. Maybe just an engine.
The crowd is trying to figure out that train's pulling anything. Doesn't look like it.
No, there's nothing on the track behind it.
Right.
And that green and whitish is off on the side.
Doug says yes, it's in northern England on the coast-to-coast walk.
Nice.
Anything else? Okay. This was one of my photos that I submitted and got thrown out because they said the center was way too dark and the outlines were way too bright.
Now, Christine, I can pick on you because I think I have the right to do that. Why didn't you put that in the center and either do a portrait crop or maybe a square crop? I just feel that maybe you got a little bit too much.
It is a square crop.
Well, what I'm saying is put it in the center and either square around the head of the sunflower or take it as a portrait and put the sunflower. Not. You've got data on the left-hand side that just does not add to the image.
Yeah, I liked the leaf leading into it.
Okay.
I saw it as a scoop up into it, so
That's
that's
fair.
what I saw.
The upper left there in the background, it just looks like there's artifacts up there. It doesn't look right. You have green branches that are connected by little purplish ghosts. So I think that I think that's a function of something you did to blur the background.
What it looks like is you had it blown out, Christine, and you tried to bring it back, where you just lost all your detail up there.
Or added some funny detail, because that is distracting from what to me is a great picture. Yes, it should be maybe a little brighter in the middle, but that's a detail. I'm constantly drawn off to the upper left, and I know you wanted that leaf down there. I like that leaf leading to it. I don't know what to do with it, but somehow you have to blur that background out or something, so it's not identifiable.
Yeah, I just walked up to the TV. I mean, the sharpness on that is amazing. He did a great job at capturing that, Christine. I just think the treatment is a little bit detracting.
Christine, I think in the future, we ought to have editing by committee on all images. But, when it's your image and you look at it and you see, you've mentioned some things you like, the leaf leading up to it and all that. I think compositionally, I get all of that. I got caught up, so I'm not being critical at all with your choice of composition, and square crop is a good idea. I lean toward John's idea of selecting out the head of that, because that is a really interesting sunflower. It's not smooth and classic. It's all rumpled, and it's kind of cool around the outside. And then I do believe that if you brightened up the interior, the center of that flower, enough that I could kind of see some detail, I might feel a little bit different about it. And the last thing is I'm seeing see the light in the petals, particularly on the right-hand side. So it may be, that's toned down a little bit. I think there's a picture there. I think it's worth taking some time with it. But don't depend on us as a committee to do it. I think you'll do a better job.
Online, Diane says that she likes the leading edge of the flower and that the background is distracting. She thinks maybe a circle would help.
Well, I think it's a nice image. The only thing would really helped it if you'd used a flash and high-speed sync, and it would cause your background to be dark, and that middle would have been right on. You wouldn't have to worry about Photoshop.
You have a comment, Bob? There you go.
Yeah, I like this image. The two leaves, the one bottom left that sort of fades away, but also the other one in the middle that's caught the sun and bright. I kind of like that one. The one that I don't like is the one on the far right that sticks out sideways. It kind of distracting, but otherwise it's a great image.
Was that in New York, Christine?
Yes.
Nice. I wonder, does anybody think that green in the middle is kind of problematic? Like if she were to put a layer over that and just color in like that same reddish, rusty color, I don't know.
Hadn't even noticed that it was green,
Yeah,
so you mentioned.
interesting. Any other comments here or online?
Scott says, with all due respect to John, the ultimate judge is the author. Christine put it well when she said that possibly the center was too dark. Enough said.
I think the green leaf coming out on the right needs to stay. Otherwise, you'd have the conflict of the blue and white sky looking too bright on the right side of the flower, conflicting with the dark green blurry on the left side. So I think it helps to break up that blue and white sky on the right and keep you focused on the positive of the flower rather than getting lost in the negatives of the background.
I agree with you, Susan.
Anyone else? This next one's also mine. What I liked about this image was the brightness and the contrast of the red, the blue, the green, the yellow. I remember the judge saying that I should crop it down and not have any of the background, but I loved the sunflowers in the background. And if you couldn't guess, yes, those are the same those are the sunflowers that the sunflower photo came from. So.
I think that's part of the image. You know, it's supposed to give you that country feeling. Old country.
That I've submitted this twice and it's gotten thrown out every time because either they don't think it's cropped right or they think the colors are too bright. But I kind of liked those aspects of it.
I like all the things that are in there, but the red on those wheels just somehow looks artificial to me. Like, maybe it needs to be a little darker or something. To me, it distracts from everything else. I just keep looking at those reds. And I want to look at the farmer and the detail of the engine and the flowers up above, you know, and the big pile of manure or whatever it is in the green background. And I just keep coming back and those reds just shock me. And I find reds the hardest thing to deal with in an image. I have a really hard time getting them right because they can really set off an image, but they're also big attention getters. That's just my reaction to it. I wouldn't change anything else about it except that.
Any other thoughts here or online? Here, Bob?
I kind of see what Rich is saying about the red, but it does make a very vivid image, and I like it. But Have you thought about, say, doing it in black and white or sepia tone to give it the old-timey feel, like 1910, 1920? It would then be kind of consistent with the apparent age of the tractor and the lifestyle of that time.
Yeah, I could see trying to do black and white. Again, I just like the contrast of, I loved the colors in this and the way they contrasted with each other, which is why I couldn't make myself turn it black and white.
I like the flower colors in the background. They wouldn't show up very well in black and white.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you would be sacrificing a lot of the impact in doing that.
Online, Denise says a sense of place is important. And Scott says, AKA context. Elaine says, I like the contrast of the hot pink wheels. To me, it's not red, but hot pink, but it's out of no place with no other subject of the same color. Out of place, sorry.
What was your title on this, Christine?
I think it was Cranky Tractor or
Okay.
something along those lines.
Yeah, he was having a bear with that tractor that day.
I liked that he was cranking it, but he was being cranky because he was getting upset because it wouldn't start. And it kind of tells the whole story. And it happened to be at an intersection where cars were going in and out of that section, so he really needed to get it moved.
What are those red things down below the front wheel?
Flowers?
Question was, what are the red things below the front wheel? And yeah, it's some kind of a weed or a flower.
Pretty saturated, which may also be an indication of the reds generally being a bit saturated, or the pinks, or whatever. I would never criticize someone else's better judgment as to what to call a color.
Anyone else
Another
have?
worthwhile picture to think about.
Okay. Next, this is war paint.
I like that. Here you go, Ron.
I shot this summer. I don't know if it was the USS Wisconsin, but it's one of those warships, and all the cities down the East Coast have them, you know, from World War II. So I walked, there's a gangway, I walked all the way around it, and I came over to this side and looked at these lines going off to the left, up and down, and so on and so forth, and these big circles, and it started to have some sort of a human feel to it, and it was very, the geometry of it. So it all kind of really talked to me, and I shot it, and I knew at the time I shot it, it had to go black and white. It didn't get a lot of love from the judges, but you know, it still just it kind of appeals to me because all the other pictures I took of the warship, this one just sort of showed the kind of forlorn, if that's the right term, the emotion of it, just sort of sitting there all chained down. So just a thought.
Looks like it's at an angle. Is that right? At a what? At an angle.
The comment is, it looks like it's at an angle. The boat might be listing to one side.
Yeah.
Now, you want to take your hand and push the back end to the left a little. True it up to the viewer.
What do people think about the sky? The blown out sky? I don't know. I mean, I can see that it's an effect you were going for.
I know what Christine's thinking. She's thinking contrast, contrast, contrast to make it look like a silhouette.
I like the reflection on the front. Anyone else have some input?
Does taking the brightness down, does cropping the brightness on the bottom help anybody? Might give it a little bit of a better base, an anchor.
I like the
wondering
details on the bow.
If you
of the
could
ship.
have shot it a little lower, so there's a little less at the top, and maybe complete the triangle at the bottom. But I mean, it's a great impact.
Scott says the brightness could be a smile if it were in a better position in the frame. Diane says, I like the lighter color on the bottom, but you could put a gradient on it. I'm wondering if the slightest vignette on the edges would help pull your eye in.
What's interesting, this was shot over the summer, and sometimes these pictures have to marinate a bit. And I believe this might have been our first open competition of the year. And I find that I get really bad over the summer with editing and all that. And as I go to try to shoot the images, and then when the judges start talking to us at the beginning of the year, I find that I've made all kinds of mistakes, like, I could have done this and I could have done that. This is one of those I really didn't do a whole lot of editing to it in the beginning, and all these suggestions have actually been quite good trying to figure it out. But to me, the image, kind of the center of it is around those two circles at the top, and there's lines going. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the image that I should, because if I cut off the rest of the boat, there isn't much there. They don't really tell the story to me. But anyway, if I'd started fiddling with this in February, maybe then I'd be more better for competition. But these judges really push you, and you feel like you have to go back and really spend more time on the images. And over the summer, we just forget that part of it.
It's true.
Diane says it looks like a bug with antenna on the outside, right and left. There's a part of me that kind of sees a bird with the eyes, and then the triangle at the top is like a beak looking away from you.
That's what's appealing about it is, from this view, you can imagine all these things.
What Rich said, that's what's appealing about it, because everybody can imagine something different.
Flight. I like this. Very simple. Is that an owl?
Where'd that owl come from? Because that owl and that window are both perfectly sharp.
I think it is. I asked him after.
Yeah, the question is the owl painted on the wall, or is it very lucky capture?
No, he said it was painted.
Yeah, there's no shadow. There's no shadow. It's got to be painted.
Well, depending on how far the owl is forward, it might not be a shadow. That's really wild. Now, is the window painted as well?
Could be.
Interesting.
John's
Really interesting.
Yeah.
John Verdi, who is the photographer, says that the judge dismissed it by saying it was well timed.
I love that.
Simple, but I like it.
Any comments? I'm going to ask a question. Hopefully somebody will take and answer my question. Is this photographing someone else's art? Anybody want that one?
Basically, it's painted, yes.
Not if the window is real.
The picture is meant to be about the window because the owl is not real. That's from John.
Yeah, in other words, the owl is painted, therefore you're photographing somebody's, but if it's half the image, so it's only 50%.
I agree. I just threw it out there because we hear that. Your decision to photograph it that way, your decision to crop it, your decision in black and white, and your tonality, that's yours. Any other comments?
Just, that was in the windows competition a couple of weeks ago. Am I correct? Windows and doors?
Yes.
Yeah, I see a big difference in the way that the judges handle the open versus the themed, because they have to put it through the first thing, they have to put it through the filter of, does it match the theme? Then secondly, they have to look at the technical aspect, whatever they do first, second, but there are two different screens you kind of put it through to do this. And I think that with the thematic thing, if something doesn't play to the theme 100%, they'll drop those out because it's easier to go and take the ones that qualify and then sort of sort from there. So it seems, that's what it looks like anyway, to me, the way the judging has been going. I think there's, I agree with Bob, the issue of the owl being in there. I don't know if it helps any, to me, the tonality that John pointed out of the owl is lighter, and they have these very dark panes in the window, and something is too balanced to me between the window and the owl where it is. The owl needs to be up or down somehow, artistically, if that's the right way to put it, to work. But I don't know, I think we just have to think about what it was standing up against at the time whenever we had the competition.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I'm trying to figure out the distinction between the gray edges and the white building. Is that what the real perspective is? Does the white end the building and the building goes back in the distance, or was it just only that part of the building was painted white and the gray is actually part of the same facade? That's what my brain's trying to work on.
Gray is just background, isn't it?
Gray's background has
And light room, yes.
The picture is
Okay.
light.
So whatever he captured in the background might have been the street or another building, and he removed it.
No, cropped. It's been cropped. The white is.
Oh, okay. This background on our
The gray
screen.
is
The screen,
is the screen.
okay.
I guess.
Yeah, that's what light
Yeah.
room puts in the background.
But my brain still wants to know what's
What's
to the left, what's to the right, how wide the building really was. Did it go 100, or straight back where you could actually see that that's the edge of the physical building?
Diane says the reflections in the windows is great. You can see other windows across the way.
Are those reflections, or are we seeing through the window?
I think they're reflections.
I can't tell.
If you go up close, it almost looks like solarization. It almost looks like glowing edges in Photoshop. So I'm not sure what that reflection is or if it's something inside.
Oh.
Interesting technique, interesting editing for sure.
Anyone else? Bridles.
I did the Frederick County Barnstormers tour back in the fall, and somehow the geometry of pictures really kind of hit me, and I saw the 4 light switch boxes, and then the pipe runs over to the other switch, the bridles in the foreground, and then this, I guess for the cats, cats and dogs, and the water down at the bottom. And I think it might have been an open image, I can't remember, but I was also caught up by the wood in the background. The bad part of it was a shadow that kind of went across it, but in a way, it kind of provided a curtain to your eye, so you could kind of focus on this in the foreground. If I remember, the judge's comment was they were really annoyed and distracted. The bridles, I think it was a still life, the bridles were fine, but all of the pipe going across and all that was distracting. So I kind of see what they were saying, but somehow it all hangs together in my head a little bit better than maybe it does in reality. So I don't know what anybody else might think about that.
do those posts up at the top, do they really add to the story? I hadn't even thought about it when I saw it, but you mention it. It's like they're maybe just a little bit distracting, and so taking them out. Because it's a fairly full picture. It has a lot of stuff in it.
Horse stall behind it, and
Right.
that's why they were over it.
I admit my eyes keep going to those posts at the top instead of to the main subject. So I wonder if you cropped it down, it would be a little more.
I like it with all the components in it because I like to see the verticals and the horizontals and the bars on the top of the horse stall and the vertical of the light switches and the bridles hanging all complement each other. And they're offset by the vertical planks, and the water jug for the animals is half full, so you get a horizontal line there. And as Ron said, the shadow breaks the two halves left and right and forces you back to where all the materials are to enjoy. So I think the pillars at the top are helpful.
Anyone else? Bench, Ms. Manna.
Management.
Mismanagement, sorry.
That was mine, and the judge was quick to throw it out, and not because of the bushes or the tree or the background trees. I forget exactly what they said, but I think.
Because it was out of kilter.
Yeah, well, that was what made it interesting, why they were positioned such that the bench on the right could just about fit one person, when in fact it could have held two or three, and why they were positioned on that stone patio, I just found very
remember that.
interesting.
It's a case of the judge forgetting what the title was.
Right.
In this case, and not realizing it was about them being misplaced.
Right. So I don't know whether, again, judges are subjective, but I enjoyed, and I probably took 30 pictures of it in different angles and different settings, but I just enjoyed the fact that they were out of kilter.
I've just noticed on the bench that's diagonal, you have this nice patchwork caused by the shadows of the bars on the seated part. You've got two patterns working to make the patchwork. It also looks like the benches are sort of marching towards you, one at you and one turning around.
I really like the humor of the picture, so I think that may have gotten lost on judges. But the technical aspects of it, Susan, the foreground is really the subject, and it's properly exposed. You got some good shadows there, and it looks really interesting. I like the fact that they're at the angle, and in fact, you took 30 pictures, 30 exposures to finally get it where you wanted. It tells me that you really were studying the setting. Only thing that I'm wondering is the background is very bright, and the benches are dark, and while you have the exposure right for the foreground for the most part, my eyes keep going back to that house in the back and the tree, and I don't know if there's a way, given the fact that the benches are in the shade, the other part is in the sun. Is there a way, even with that, to try to drop that a few steps in the background, so it's not quite as prominent? I want to be able to look at it and go directly to the benches.
Yeah, that bright spot right in the center on the top keeps drawing my eye in. So you might want to try to burn that down a little bit. Elena's asking what the title for this is. It's Bench Mismanagement. Anyone else? Elaine said she liked it. Going back to this. Scott says, a little hard to read, but another case of seeing as opposed to looking. Not every attempt will be successful. Keep marching. Again, humor is very difficult to photograph without the result being corny. This is Cigar Box Memories.
Is this Mike?
I
Mike
think it
Thomas's?
was.
Yeah, he's not here tonight. He's online. If he wants to tell the story, I think the judge didn't understand what brought everything together, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Because, you know, you used to get photos and you used to find a box to store them in, and there's the cameras that made them in the story. I think it's a little dark on top, though.
With a couple of bright spots, like on the camera on the right.
Yeah, let me come over here and let Rich say that. But yeah, the white of the lid and the dark of the wood is a little jarring.
Yeah, I agree with that. And on the camera on the right, it looks like it's blown out in the two corners, but, you know, that's a technical detail. Right. Other than that, it's, you know, you're trying to tell a story, and we don't all get the same story from it. And apparently the judge didn't appreciate the story he was trying to tell, or got a different one out of it.
Anyone else have something to say? There we go.
Just a few thoughts. Old pictures like this really can go together in an image to be really good. And I do like the notion, the old cigar boxes, we did this around my house, was anything that could hold pictures, you know, they all kind of went in there. The part that I'm kind of looking for a flow in this, and what happens is I look straight at it, the picture's in the middle, and it kind of pops and there, and these objects are all in the center. I'm wondering if dropping, and this probably won't work, but anyway, dropping down a little bit from the perspective, looking down a foot or so to the subject A, B, taking the camera away on the left-hand side and moving the box to the upper left-hand corner and kind of having the picture spilling out of the box down across the wood, something like that, because if it has a little bit of flow that my eye can follow, then that might go. And I think John's right about just a bit darker on the top there than you might like to have, particularly since the lid on the Phillies Perfecto, that's really pretty white in contrast in that area. But I love the idea, and I'd love to be able to have a couple of cameras like that around to work into a few images. Pretty cool.
That's a great idea, Ron. Less is more. I like the idea of the images spilling left to right, and then that camera being in the top right. That'd be a great idea. Any other comments?
Online Mike says thanks. Anyone else? Okay. This is mine, and the title is Look, Mom. I think the judge thought it was too busy and couldn't understand.
The judge, I think, wanted you to crop in on the gondola itself. And I remember seeing this image when you took it.
The title would certainly suggest that. Look, Mom, I had to look for a while to figure out where the title came from. So the title would suggest that you probably want to get a little bit of the tower and that in there. I'm just using your title as guidance.
Did you add that vignette, Christine?
Yes.
I think you're a little heavy-handed with that.
Yeah.
I think a good vignette, you don't know it's there. But I think it's very important to see at least the tower.
Yeah.
I didn't agree with the judge saying to crop it so harsh. that you get just the people in the gondola. Although that could be an image, I think you tell a little bit more of a story seeing the tower.
I liked the balance of the upper gondola with the lower gondola that's a little harder to see in the bottom right, which is why I cropped it the way I did.
The bottom right is not easily decipherable.
The image is really about that. I think the image is really about that gondola. Again, you know, I tend to crop tight. Maybe a piece of the tower and so on to go right in there because I love the. I mean, it's really a cool image with the kid pointing up and so on. I think Rich said, I didn't know that was the. Once you said the title of it, I got what the image was, and I went to the kid. So less is more, I think, in things like this. And the lower gondola on the right-hand side, if you leave it like it is, it ends up being two images. You've led me to look at the left. I've totally ignored what's on the right-hand side, I'm thinking. But yeah, good timing.
Anyone else? Online, Elaine said, what if you just cropped in on the right to the center of the tower? It's too dark in the upper corners.
That's your vignette. I like the shadow, that you put it in shadow, and the tone of the background gives you the feeling of distance. So I don't think you need the right third.
Yeah, Doug says, I think the center of the left pylon.
The comment being maybe get rid of the right third.
Okay, anyone else? Apples and cider. Is this Mike's too?
Yeah.
I liked this photo. I think the judge, I remember them saying that it was two separate pictures.
Yeah, the judge didn't like the fact that it had words in it, but unfortunately the words are necessary to explain the image.
I'm not sure they're necessary, but they're useful.
I liked the tonality of this too.
I wonder if you had a glass there with it's cider, right?
Right.
Okay, I wonder if it had a small glass there with cider sitting with the two elements in the image. They always tell you have an odd number, 3 or 5 or something like that. But now, all that aside, I did a spectacular job here of getting the background is great, the lighting is perfect, the tonality on those apples. I mean, you can feel like you can just reach right out and grab them. So I'm just wondering about that third element's the only thought I had.
Online, Elaine says, nice. Maybe have the jug next to the plate of apples instead of so far away. Diane says, yes, great color. And Scott says, beautifully lit and processed. Anyone else? Westward Ho.
That was mine. Again, for some reason, it looks dark. But anyway, he threw it out because it was it's too commercialized, and what do you got? Had too much letters in it. But
Those are the still life image?
yeah, and the way I shot it, but for some reason, it just looks dark to me. But the way I shot it was, I had a piece of glass and black background in this, and I had a couple speed lights going on, and just used a 2x2 softbox. That
How
one.
big is that wagon?
What's that?
How big is that wagon? Small?
The wagon?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only about this big. My dad gave it. I thought my wife got it, but my dad gave it to me about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. I didn't know it.
The question was, how big is it? And the answer was, what, maybe about 4 inches tall?
No, it's like,
Oh, okay.
it's
About the size of a loaf of bread.
Yeah, but for some reason, this is, you know, it had more, maybe one monitor.
Yeah, Fred's saying it looks really dark up on this monitor. Yeah.
You know, like the letter.
Diane says, nice balance.
This is a real nitpick, but if you shoot it again, move the harness just a little bit away from the wheel in the shadow to separate them.
You know, matter of fact, I think I got that shot because it's not like 40 times. You know, just, I had it going backwards and then I had it sideways, you know, and I took the front of that and put that out of the frame. I didn't like that, but I could have done it another way. I probably have the one you're talking about and I just chose that.
Something that kind of takes me back is you've got this nice old-timey subject, but you're getting an industrial black plexi reflection look. If you had a big piece of leather and you made kind of like an infinity wall with leather and put that on the leather, I think it would really tie everything together. Any other comments online or here?
Mixing cultures.
Wow. Oh, let me give this to Mike. Mike Seal. There you go.
That was mine, and again, you have to be careful. I'm learning about what is subjective to you, that even with the title, the judge didn't appreciate the difference, because those dragon sculptures are representative of Chinese culture, but those swords are Japanese culture. They're part of a fighting martial arts thing. They're called katanas. So to me, the contrast between the two cultures is what stood out. But unless the audience knows it, they don't appreciate it, unless the judge knows the reference. So I'm learning not to be too personal with what I.
Or subtle.
But I don't know, even if there would have been a less subtle title in that particular competition, would have done anything, but.
I like this. I like the swords and the lines they make, and then the dragons in the front. It might help if you had one more dragon to give that odd number, because you have 6 of them, and you're kind of a little off balance because you have 3 on one side and then 2 on the other, that bigger one in the center. Just something nitpicky, but I note something my mind noticed.
Sue, I think you're right about the fact that the figurines in the foreground, I didn't understand the connection between them and the swords in the background as well. So that's probably, sometimes we have to kind of get out of our own head and think about what the viewer is going to see and assume the worst from the viewer in terms of what context they'll get for it. But the other thing, I wonder, it's very symmetrical. You got these swords as they would be displayed in the background, and you got a great clean tabletop there. You got a nice blue background and all that, but a little bit of, somehow it's too perfect. They almost need to be in a bit of a disarray or a bit of a pattern that it would give my eye some cue to follow some lines or some movement through the picture. Maybe swords out of the sheath, 1 or 2, and the others to the side or something. I don't know. I have no idea, because I really don't like doing still lifes. It's really hard for them not to look static, and right now it just feels a little bit static. albeit really interesting in terms of the content.
Online, Doug says half the dragons are Western D&D minis. As for the image, I don't think you need the dragons at all. Draw the top sword and put it on the table.
Yeah, I did another layout, I don't think I submitted it, where the swords were, in their sheaths, were laying flat, and we got so much reflection off the gold band where the sword stops and the sheath starts. So I went out in the deck and I clipped 3 small roses off the rose bush and set them on the gold just to get away from the reflection. But I might try, the wall is no longer that color. It's been painted a light gray, but might try some other arrangement. And we do have more dragons. We can make it an odd number or have them marching away from the swords, that kind, abandoning well, they're competition swords, but abandoning the idea of war and marching away might be a different thought to using those objects.
I think Doug's onto something here. I don't even think you need the dragons. Those swords are simplistic enough. If you kept them like that, I don't know if you can take a little bit of the sword out of the sheath on the top one and leave it mounted. But I mean, that's a very strong shape there, very simplistic and very impactful to me.
Maybe take it completely out and leave one sword. Maybe. Except the sheen is gone. We have to work on shining them up again, but it's possible.
There is another version of one sword being drawn, slicing an apple, and then the seeds from that apple appear to be running away.
Online, Scott says concentration seems to be on the swords and the detail in the sculpted pieces is lost. Would a slightly lower angle help to pull the dragons more? Anyone else? Art supplies.
Beautifully composed picture.
I was wondering if there were maybe too many items, but the way the colors balance, the red paint on the right paintbrush with the red tube and the red brush on the left, I carefully arranged the green, the yellow, the white, but I wasn't sure if there were too many objects. The candies in the left side glass are a bit hot, but maybe we could put a different kind of candy in there so that the light isn't quite so bouncing.
I'm not sure the candies are even needed other than if you wanted it there for the balance for the other glass that's in there.
Right. Yeah, I think the original title, when I submitted it, had relax in it. And I changed it for the conversation, but the candies might add to the concept of relax, and in knowing that the other glass is representative of wine, but
Doug says I'd flip the right and left tube to have the red balanced instead of having all the red on one side.
Comments? I think you're onto something, Sue, because honestly, when I think of painting, relax is the last thing that's on my mind. So again, it becomes subjective. But I do like everything else. I like the paints there. I like the paintbrush. I like everything about it. But in my mind, yeah, the candies, the relax rock, and even the little vase there, it doesn't make sense to me. Now, if you had a painting of the flowers in the vase, then it would tie it together. Any other comments?
Attleboro Mill, I can't read the last word.
Look on the bottom.
Collapse. Attleboro Mill collapse.
Definitely grungy. Any ideas on that? Any thoughts? Fred asks if that was submitted to windows and doors.
I think it's from Diane Thatcher. She said,
I think you
Old
can
Mill
crop-
Building at sunset.
I think you can crop down a little bit. I think that little patch of blue sky is not really necessary, and it's kind of drawing my eye up there.
It looks a little crunchy to me, like the edges and some of the woodsy areas look like they're too contrasty. No, she did not submit.
Maybe too much sharpening. Yeah, so there's definitely some kind of a effect on that.
Any other comments? I'm just not sure what the story is here or what.
I'm trying to reconcile my eye with the geometry of this. You see all these lines are kind of going different directions up on the top. You see the roof line is kind of coming down. You've got all these are, the only thing it seemed like it's completely perfectly aligned is the windowsill with the frame of the picture. And so on. There's a lot there to look at, and I see it cropping in. I think John's right. We don't need the sky up there. I'm wondering if the window was the theme. So, is there a possibility of cropping it down in closer to that window? But the issue, John, you said you saw some looked like processing up there that might have cued the judge in a particular direction. Actually, Christine, did you say this was not submitted?
Yeah, she said no, did not submit.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm having a hard time finding the object. There are different pieces there, and they're just not quite working together, but it seemed like a piece of this might be an image there. I just don't know where it is.
Online, Clarence says, before it gets too late, I just want to throw in my one thought. I feel there is just too much in most of these. Less is more. And
Yeah.
Diane says, I'm into old buildings that are just about to go south. The building is leaning.
Well, Diane, I think you need to show us more of the building then. Basically the thing is, what do you want me to, how do you want me to feel? What story do you want to tell, and what is my subject? And I completely agree with Ron that it's a little busy. I don't know where to look. I mean, every inch of that building is worthy of a shot, of a macro shot. But if you're trying to tell us that this building might not be around next week, I think we need a little bit wider of an angle.
Scott says, leaning, interesting. Why didn't you photograph the lean?
There you go.
And Elaine says, crop it to the roof line, maybe? Anyone else? Maryland barn.
With a pole sticking up in front of it.
Yeah.
Who shot this one?
DCV.
Is that Diane Vatcher?
Yeah, this must be Diane also.
Diane, you were so close, moving a little bit right or a little bit left and framing that building in that fence line if you wanted to, or just even getting closer and getting the fence out of there. I think the fence just detracts it. What does anybody else think?
She says, can't get to building fences. I am going to crop it out. Yeah, I like the barn, I like the trees.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, very good black and white. That fence post right in the middle, though.
Sky is handled very nicely. I like it.
And like I said, even if you move that fence post to the left, it would make an interesting framing element, a little bit of an anchor on the bottom. Maybe get low and to the right and shoot the barn through that fence post or through the gate. Might be an interesting angle.
Anyone else? Fence will leave, I can do that. Spider web. I like this. Moisture.
This one of Bob's can't be because there's no
No, this
spider in
is
it.
another one of Diane's.
Wow, well captured.
I like the moisture on this. This is well caught.
It's tough. That's difficult.
Nice picture.
That should do well.
Do we think the green adds to it, or should we turn it to monochrome? Leave it just like that with the green, huh?
That one leaf top left, though, is distracting.
The white is,
The whitish.
yes, I agree.
Susan and Rich are saying the leaf on the top left is distracting.
I like the green.
She says, standing on a ladder, it is an optical illusion.
Fred says leave it just like that.
Anyone else? Against the flow.
Against the flow. Is there a pair of shoes that are going the wrong way? Oh, yep, I see them.
I've presented this a couple of times, and I don't think the judge ever gets it, but you're right. There's two contrasts. The black shoes in the middle are going in the opposite direction for the rest of them. And also they're black, whilst the remaining shoes all tend to be largely white.
Is it negative? You turn it negative? Yeah, it looks
probably, yeah, probably. It's just a simple, the individual standing against the crowd idea, done in shoes.
I like it, but I wonder if the negative effect just is too jarring to the mind. Because I'm trying to get an idea of shoes, and on the ones on the left where there should be a shadow, I'm seeing bright white. I like to see this in normal, not inverted.
It doesn't look nearly as good.
Gotcha.
Bob, I'm wondering, so these white shoes here were actually originally dark, so you went white with them instead?
Yeah, I have pushed it. The original background is actually a floor.
Okay.
I pushed it because I wanted to get rid of all the detail in the floor and have it black.
Okay. The shoes, when I look at it, I get caught up in looking at all the white shoes, and the black shoe, which is your subject, doesn't stand out. Yeah, it gets completely lost, and it may be easier to see that if you can drop the tonality, drop the whites down a little bit, darken them just a little bit, and somehow add some, lighten up the highlights on your dark shoe. I don't know. I mean, it's a super idea. That's a super idea. I would go back and play with that a number of different ways and reshoot it, Bob. That's a super idea.
I need to get all my son's friends to come over for a sleepover. and get all
Okay.
their shoes.
There you go.
Yeah, maybe if the white shoes weren't all,
So white.
no, if they weren't all in the same line, I guess that's deliberate, but if you mixed them up with the black and white shoes.
I didn't catch your theme until I thought about it, because the flow, is chaotic in itself. So I didn't even notice that the black one was going the other way, because the white ones are, they're all kind of going to the left, but they're going this way and that way, and they're at different angles. You might emphasize against the flow more by having the flow be a little less chaotic. I don't know.
Life isn't that simple.
Trying to see if I can move. No, I
Yeah,
can't move it.
well, you're doing a photograph, you can make it as simple as you want it to be. I don't know, I just didn't catch it right away when I saw it. I saw a bunch of shoes going in random directions.
It is subtle, I'll give you that.
And the black ones were the last ones that I cottoned onto.
Right, right.
And in fact, the white ones, I don't know, they're a bit jarring to me, but anyway. It's a cool concept, and it's the kind of thing that's fun to do, and it often doesn't get picked up as, it's a winning image.
Yeah.
Jokes just don't make it, comedies don't win Best Picture.
Rich says jokes are hard to make and make it work in a contest. I agree. Any other
And we-
comments online or in person?
And we have our last photo.
Ooh,
This is Annapolis skylight window.
That's a Bob, isn't it?
That's a Bob.
Yeah, here you go, Bob. Talk about your image.
Guilty as charged. This is a rooftop in Annapolis. I wanted to emphasize the green skylights, so I folded it, but then I had this large set of brickwork in the bottom middle, and I wanted to detract from that, so I took a piece of the sky on the left, on the right, and stretched it a wee bit to kind of make that doorway in the bottom. But looking at it more closely, the hexagonal green part is probably a picture in itself, because there's a lot of detail and a suggestion of a face in the middle. So maybe next time I'll just keep that bit.
Kind of looks a guy with arms and then two sets of legs down the pillars holding himself up there.
Any comments?
I really like the green and the brown and the colors that you've chosen to put in this. And I know that when you do your images, you make the color. You don't necessarily depend on what's there. And I think maybe that's right. I had a hard time when I first saw this past contest or so, trying to figure out how the stuff on the bottom fits. So maybe there is something to reduce, cropping it in a little bit might allow me to, my eye to focus in on the subject, particularly because that does have a face there, but,
Yeah,
quite
I'll
cool.
probably do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Bob, can you use that, can we use that as a painting in the other one coming up? Would that fall in that category of being as a painting?
Could be.
Yeah.
Doug said the same thing online. He said it looks like a painting. Elaine
That's a-
says it reminds me of Spider-Man or Batman movie in Gotham City. I like this very much.
That's going to be interesting with the judge, because who knows what the judge thinks looks like a painting. It's kind of a big, we're rolling the dice, and I'm kind of excited about
I
that.
picked out a couple that I'm sure, I think look like a painting, but I'm not at all confident how someone else will see it.
Yeah. Any other comments? Anything online, Christine?
Not that I haven't read.
Okay, do we want to end the meeting?
One more general comment?
One more just comment from Sue.
Yeah. No particular picture to add to what I'm about to say, but in past contests, there have been images, say a landscape with a horse and a barn, and the judge would say, I love how my eye works its way around the image, and I start down here, and then I notice something here, and it's just a wonderful collection of things to enjoy. But lately, the last year or so with judges, everything is, what's your subject? Crop, 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 crop. And to me, it's hard to balance when you want, not in a still life example, but in a landscape, how do you balance, I see so many wonderful things and I want to enjoy all of them versus, well, the judge is going to tell me to crop it, so I'll just use the waterfall. I think it's a real challenge for me. I prefer the notice everything and appreciate all of it.
I think this is a good critique tonight and a good opportunity for us to see, among other things, every one of us sees each of these images differently. And when we go shoot our own pictures and we see or have our own vision, sometimes as we fiddle with it, it turns out to be something else. I think that the feedback from the judges is going to, we need to view it completely independent. So don't think that there's a trend in the way judges are looking, because first of all, they're looking to make sure they're paying attention to the technical aspects of it. And we're all really good at getting the technical aspects down, the tonality and framing and all that. But we have to all be reminded of it and so on. But I think that there's quite a variety of opinions on the parts of the judge. And when I get a picture thrown out by one judge, I don't throw it out of my own mind, because down the road, if I really believe in the picture, I may find a judge who likes it, or I may find a wall in my house that likes it as well. So, we shouldn't be discouraged by judges, but, it's input and it's somebody else's point of view, and maybe it's something we need to be considering, and maybe not. Maybe it's my image and I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
And I have one last comment from Scott. He says, good that some of the members are talking about content. However, I hear a lot of comments about taking out this detail or that dark area and on and on. Not enough taking in the photograph as a whole, nor enough about what the photograph means to the viewer or the photographer.
That's a good thing, but we do get a lot of judges that do gravitate mostly on the technicals. And Ron and I have talked about this a lot. Sometimes a judge doesn't know what to feel about an image, and I've used the word crutch, but I don't want to use the word crutch because, and sometimes they'll just go back and they'll start dinging it on technical ability when they really don't know how to explain why they really don't like it. And I've noticed that a lot, and I've had that a lot. I'm sure Ron has too. But it's definitely good. And that's why we allow you to submit images up to 3 times, because I know it's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to everybody here, where the 3rd time you submit it, you may win a ribbon. It just depends on who you've got it in front of. It's very interesting. Christine, can you move over the camera? What do we have here? Thank you for joining us tonight. Am I on?
Yes.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Next week, we have our digital contest with the theme of open. Remember, that is virtual only. And then after that, we have Harry Crossland, cosplay photographer. Is he setting up anything?
I don't think for other people, but he's going to bring a model in to show some of what he does.
Yeah, so it'd be really good to see that. And then January 26th, our color and monochrome print contest with the theme of open. So definitely start getting those together. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you next week, virtual.
Yes.